This week on MS Refresh, we are dissecting the fire hose of updates that was Microsoft Ignite Part 2, plus our thoughts on the biggest announcements and how they'll affect your organization. All that and more. Subscribe to stay in the know. This is the MS Refresh Show. Hi there, and welcome to the Matt and Sean 365 Refresh Show. This is episode 44 for the week of November 8th, 2021. Coming to you from the East Coast. My name is Matt Wade.
Coming from the West Coast, Sean Bugler.
Hey, buddy. What's going on?
Cold over here, Matt.
It's colder over here, I can guarantee you. I've had to scrape my car every morning this week. Well, it's only Monday, but let's say over the last 5 or so days.
It's a balmy 60 degrees over here.
Yeah, I have no sympathy. No.
How are you feeling? We are removed a couple of days from Ignite. Do you feel rejuvenated?
I'm still wet from the fire hose, I think. I think I'm
Sure.
still a little drenched, if you will. But
Yeah.
a lot of good announcements, a lot of meh announcements. But we figured we'd talk a little bit about some of the big things that popped out. Also take some questions. If you are interested, feel free to drop a comment down below and we will take those on. I don't know. I think there's some pretty good ones. What did you think of the overall, production or the experience and whatnot now?
You know, I tweeted about this. I think that for me, this was the third like digital, pandemic Ignite.
Yep.
But this one felt the biggest.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And not just in the sense of like the scope and scale of the announcements, although that definitely like played a hand in it. Microsoft did a really good job of making everything feel interconnected. There were a lot of times where I was watching sessions and I actually had to like take a step back and go like, am I watching a Teams thing? Am I watching a Dynamics thing? A Power Platform thing? Like they were deeply interconnected, which I enjoyed.
Yeah, that's really insightful. I hadn't thought of it that way. You're right that there's more. It's more like on the use case might be a little bit too back padding, but less about the tool and more about the need, I guess.
Yeah, there were a lot of journey conversations, which I really liked.
Word.
It was clear that people were sitting down and thinking through, the user stories of it. Like I am blah, blah, blah in sales. Like what does that journey look like for me on the day-to-day?
Yeah.
That's what a lot of these announcements felt like. And there was still like a lot of interesting forward-looking stuff, but we definitely didn't get, thank God, another mesh as like the domineering, or like the marquee announcement was a thing that just wasn't going to exist for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. At most everything is either coming out this year or in the first half of next year that they announced. Yeah.
And now granted, some of them might be in preview, but yeah, I guess that's we'll give them mostly partial credit for that.
Yeah. So, I mean, all in all, I felt like it was a good event. It was obviously, Microsoft has just absolutely nailed production value at this point. It's hard to imagine how you could possibly translate what they've learned here into an in-person conference. Like, what does hybrid look like? I mean, do you bring that kind of production value to a physical space? That sounds like a lot. And a lot of that stuff is pre-recorded, So, I mean, do they chance it?
So here's my opinion is that I think that people will never actually replace in-person conferences with online conferences in a full way that would have been as valuable as it was in person. So my issue is that the Ignite backpack, right? And it's not a Microsoft or an Ignite thing. It has everything to do with just online conferences in general.
And you're talking about like the digital like session backpack, not the physical backpacks that we used to get every year.
But I still want one of those too. Another one.
I'm surprised we didn't get one. What the hell?
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna have to write a nasty gram to somebody. But I think the biggest thing is I'm still at work. I can set myself as out of office, whatever, but I will be bothered. And if I'm not physically away from my desk or physically out of the office in some way that legitimately separates me from work, I'm not going to get as inclusive of an experience and as robust, I guess,
Yeah.
and deep of an experience. And it's not just about the talking to other people that, and intermingling with other people that do the same thing. It's also about well, I could just answer that one email and catch back up on that thing. Whereas if I was at the conference, I'm significantly less likely to actually let myself be distracted because holy crap, this place paid, thousands of dollars for me to be here right now. And also this is a little bit of I have to learn all day long, but I can have some fun afterwards. Right.
Yeah.
I think hybrid for this works. I'm going to be less likely to watch any pre-recorded videos. And of course, if I walk into a room and the videos or the presentation is going to be pre-recorded, I'm not going to be very happy with that. But if the person who had pre-recorded it is there to present and go through it from human to human and answer questions, I don't need it necessarily to be live streamed, right? The pre-recorded version is already up there and available. But you have that person available. You can ask questions. And that's what you're paying for, right? Is the interactivity between you, the SMEs, or you and other people, or whatever else. So I think it's doable as long as they, decide to embrace the concept of the conference in person can be basically a version of the conference online. But I don't really, necessarily. I don't want to necessarily watch a video. I might want to hear the person speak and go through demos and have other things to talk about and give the opportunity to ask questions and sort of get that input. So I think any conference that went virtual probably has a vested interest in going back to being in person, but also supporting that virtual if it makes sense, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, I'll be really interested to see what the end result of this is. I mean, do you have dedicated physical and dedicated digital? I know that lots of speakers, particularly in our space, really prefer the pre-recorded because it lets them sharpen their message. Demos never fail in a pre-recorded session. You're not going to be attacked by like the surprise question that is licensing,
which should never be a surprise question, but
ever.
Right. Ever. Right. No.
So it'll be interesting. I think that's going to be one of those things that we're just going to have to like set up a bingo card for 2022 and see just how much of that comes to life.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair.
So a question for you, as you watched, this absolute barrage of announcements at Ignite, was there anything that jumped out to you that was kind of like, wow, or maybe not wow, but you saw potential?
So I'm happy to finally get some concrete move forward on a lot of these Teams features, especially Teams Connect or shared channels, actually like working its way forward, because we've talked about it or heard about it for just so long now that it's like we finally put a date on it. But the big one for me overall is going to be Microsoft Loop. And if you didn't see much on that, or you're not, too familiar with what that is, Loop is essentially going to be a way to add live components across different apps within O365. I think this is definitely a game changer. I think Loop is going to be similar to, in a couple of years, to what Teams is now. And I know that the question that pops up about this is, why do we need another app? And my short answer to that is that this isn't about the app, it's about the components, because now I can put a task list or a status update in the PowerPoint presentation to the C-suite, and a memo to file to the CEO, or an email to the CFO, so that no matter who opens up each of these different mediums, that task list is always up to date. So I only have to update it in one place. So that real concept, I've always pushed that concept of single source of truth for files. Don't email an attachment ever anymore. Always link to a file, so it's always that single source of truth. Well, this can be components within the documents that they themselves are a single source of truth. And I think it's a major offering. And now, Sean, you are familiar with sort of a competitor tool to this, right?
I was surprised to hear that, to see that Microsoft had so clearly acquired Notion secretly. I didn't read anything about that, but clearly just based on the product design, that has to be Notion, right?
Yeah, who knew? So I've actually never used Notion before, but I do know that the Loop components, which used to be called Fluid components, Microsoft Loop is now the rebranded version of Fluid. These components have existed in theory, or in it's coming soon status for a long time, and we only just got the concept of these live components in or now loop components in Teams chats. And like the use case there, like so easy to make a comparison here is like, I want to send a message or like a draft of like content or like I don't know, a newsletter article to somebody else to review or a couple people to review. Like they can't edit that message back, right?
Sure.
So you might have to get stuck with the wiki. Teams wikis suck, sorry. So like this live component thing, this loop component lets you make that change. And the canvas in the new Loop app when it comes out is basically Notion, right? But the components themselves, you're not going to get that integration in PowerPoint, in Word, in OneNote, in Outlook, in all these different apps to drop these editable tools or items in something like Notion. You're kind of working on the Notion canvas, I assume. You don't have that cross-suite, just completely built-in feature set. So I'm with you that ultimately the loop canvas concept is much of a Notion
feels
thing,
familiar.
But it could very well be they saw Notion after they were working on the fluid components way back when. I'm like, oh, we should have a canvas for this. That's a good idea.
Well, it's a generous interpretation, and I respect it. But to that end, I mean, and this is the reality that any software as a service platform has to come to grips with, which is that you're going to have a great idea that ultimately can't exist as a single product, or if it is, has to very quickly become part of a larger ecosystem if you're going to survive.
Yeah.
Because otherwise the Microsofts, the Googles, the Apples of the world are going to come in and they're going to eat your lunch because
rip you off.
Yeah. I mean, Teams is a great example of that, and people can disagree all they want, but the reality is that Microsoft was able to become competitive with Slack really, really quickly because of this broader integration. Not necessarily because, and I love the Teams team, not necessarily because it was a better product, but because in the earliest days, it was already integrated with everything we already had.
Yeah, totally with you. Now there was a question here that asked whether or not the rebranding of Fluid was something that would fall flat. I don't think so at all. I think that this is going to become, for the people that see the need immediately, they are going to be standard bearers for this feature set. I am going to be all over using this as opposed to typing something out in 7 different places when I don't need to, because that's going to help me out. So I don't think that this is going to fall flat. I don't think this is like Peg People in Teams meetings. I don't think that this is like SharePoint Spaces, both of which have fallen flat and will fall flat and will never be something people use on a day-to-day basis unless they're forced to. At least come back to me in 3 or 4 years and
taking a hot take on that.
Throw this video right back in my face, but I think those are a no-go. The one thing I will say that I don't like about Loop is that when you create a loop, it gets saved to your OneDrive.
Yeah, I was going to talk. I want to bring that up. Let's drill into that, because that was kind of the big concern that we had, you and I, behind the scenes when we were talking about Fluid components, is that Fluid components out of the gate are owned by a person.
Yeah.
They're owned by someone. And as far as I can tell, there's no conversation right now around what Loop looks like in SharePoint, as an example. You know, that's always been the kind of the me versus the we.
Yeah.
You know, OneDrive and SharePoint. But as far as I can tell, Loop and SharePoint weren't in the same sentence at all.
I only heard OneDrive.
Like it's an early part of the conversation, and I get that. But there's something concerning around this conversation of an entirely new file types that completely break convention with respect to what collaboration has looked like in the Microsoft universe. Like, we've talked a lot about this idea of, and I know that, you know, the G word, the governance word, is scary to some people, but that's what made the Microsoft universe compelling, because otherwise Notion was already an existing product. Box has Box Notes, which is basically this, but a little less fluid. You know, Google Wave from 10 years ago, like
yeah, pour one out.
But ultimately, where Microsoft has the secret sauce has always been this space where we own something, not me own something. So, I mean, what do you think is going to come of this? I mean, are we going to see SharePoint integration? Are we going to see support as just a broad file type?
I watched. So the file type is .fluid based on the demos. So I watched the video on the Loop, just overview, right? And it was a short video. It was only like 12 or 15 minutes long, like not one of those hour-long, deep dive sessions. And the only references was to OneDrive. And in fact, they were using that as almost an argument in favor of it, because some of the concerns I've seen pop up on social media is, what happens when somebody uses a loop component in an email? How does that work for e-discovery, right? Because every time you open the email, it's a different version of the email technically, right? Because you got that box with that that live component. But they, the argument in that loop session was that, well, all this stuff is in OneDrive. So you have retention, you have e-discovery, you have sensitivity, all these different, security and compliance features built in. But what the heck happens when somebody leaves the organization and people are using this business critical loop feature? And it's the exact same storyline, the same reason why I tell everybody that I work with, every opportunity I get, don't just one-off share stuff from OneDrive. Find a site or a team to drop it in so that when you leave the organization, because you will leave the organization guaranteed, everybody else isn't freaking out 30 days later because your stuff got deleted and the manager that ended up getting that OneDrive didn't do something with it like they're supposed to because they got crap to do, right? So I am really not a fan of Microsoft sort of always dumping things to OneDrive because there's no better place to put it, but not good. There needs to be some sort of strategic implementation, roadmap on making sure this stuff is, I would almost go so far as to say defaulted to SharePoint. You can't use it unless you got a place to store it, unless you accept some iTunes user agreement saying that you understand the ramifications of using OneDrive, because most people don't know the difference, right? There's a reason that's one of my most popular videos is the difference between OneDrive and SharePoint, right?
Sure.
So I could go on a rant about this for about 3.5 days if I wanted to, but I will stop there.
I loved I immediately thought to myself, because obviously I just changed organizations, like sending an email with the loop component and then immediately leaving the organization. Like, what happens to that email?
Yeah.
That's just there's no it.
Yeah, that section of the email just becomes blank or something, or like it throws a load error, 404.
It's going to be the little sad ice cream cone or the bicycle that you see in SharePoint.
Can't wait for emails with ice cream cones being read out by district attorneys and U.S. attorneys cross country.
So another thing I wanted to bring out, this wasn't on our list, so I'm just throwing it to this at you ad hoc, but Microsoft announced, there was a lot of team announcements that were just re-announcements, but there was one that was a nice, pleasant surprise, which was all the emojis basically can be used as reactions to chat messages.
Yeah. I did not expect that. In fact, I was so certain that wasn't going to happen. I even wrote it in my book saying as like a little note, FAQ, or like, like this will very unlikely that Microsoft will ever change from the six emoji. That doesn't mean you shouldn't buy my book, by the way. The book's great. Minus that one little statement.
Still out there.
Perfect Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa gift, whatever works for you.
And in case anybody doesn't know, Matt will personally sign it if you catch him at a conference like the one coming up.
I'm speaking at in December. That's absolutely true. Yeah, you are exactly right. I would be happy to sign any book. Also, I'm going to be giving away a couple of copies for free at the conference. I should mention that. I got some Microsoft Teams t-shirts and stuff like that. Oh, yeah. It's going to be good.
But yeah, so I mean, I do want to come back to this because I have been a staunch proponent of the fact that emoji to me is what Microsoft is positioning video as, which is it's an incredibly powerful component of communication in a virtual world. It allows you to have nuance. It allows you to have feeling in a way. I mean, there have been plenty of studies. There's one that stands out to me where like this upcoming generation, we're the bleeding edge of it, where show a picture of a person smiling and, we know like our endorphins light up. Show a picture of a smiley emoji and similar endorphins light up in this generation, far more so than, the boomers. And this is not a, anti-boomer thing or anything. This is just, we perceive emotions differently now because of these mechanisms of communication. So it makes sense to broaden the range of emotions we can communicate with. So I just want to go on the record and say, I thought they needed to do it. I'm glad they did it. My only question is, are they going to be using the 3D versions of these emojis? Because I don't know if you've seen the controversy, but Windows 11 is not using the 3D version. They're using a 2D version of those new emojis.
Oh, really? Oh, I thought they just hadn't fully rolled out the 3D version yet.
No, somebody on the Windows Insider team, I believe, came out, and I'll see if I can dig up the tweet, came out and said, no, this is as designed. They're going to be using the 2D version of those new shiny emojis. I hope they've backtracked since then, because
I mean, I'm really happy that I kept my pitchfork and torches from the last, thing that I really went out at. So yeah, that's yeah, okay. I'll have to check that out. I haven't upgraded my Windows PC to Windows 11 yet because
You've
the
been
minute that I
too
do,
emphatic about your new Windows
well,
or your MacBook Pro.
well, that's true. Yes, my MacBook Pro is beautiful and I love it. But I have some screenshots and stuff I'm working on for another project that I'm sure the moment that I upgrade to Windows 11, they'll come back and say, "Oh, you need to replace some of these screenshots," and I don't have Windows 10 to do the screenshots on. So anyway, so what's something that stood out for you? You're probably pretty excited about some Power Platform news since that's your big thing.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think I was really glad to see them continue to turn the focus towards Power Platform and enhancing that experience. And we got some questions on that we're going to throw to in just a minute, but I want to run through kind of three big ones that jumped out to me. And the first one is licensing. You know, it's rare that Microsoft announces licensing changes that aren't, you're going to be spending more money. And so this was a nice surprise. You know, it's no secret that Microsoft has had trouble selling licenses to Power Automate and Power Apps simply because the bulk of the people using them are just regular Joe, Jane schmoes like you and I. Like they're just throwing things together. And I, as somebody who's just, you know, on the front lines doing my job, I'm probably not going to be able to make a business case for the organization spending, you know, $5,000 or $10,000 or, you know, however big your organization is, a couple $100,000 on Power Apps P2 licenses if I can't really articulate, one, if anybody's going to use it, two, if they are going to use it, what's going to be the ROI,
and three, what is a Power Apps P2 license and what does that mean?
Right. So I mean, these are big insurmountable challenges that Microsoft has been facing. We've seen that one of the big combat tools that they've started to go to, and more than just the Power Platform, has been this idea of micro purchasing, just letting you go and grab your credit card and self-service purchase these add-on licenses. You know, like we're seeing Microsoft try to get creative in that instead of really doing some soul searching and thinking about, well, how do we make this more attractive for businesses to want to spend money on? So what they did is they announced this concept of pay as you go. So the idea here is that as opposed to, and this is kind of for anybody that operates with Azure, this is, you know, it's basically the same concept that you can connect Power Apps to your Azure subscription and just pay as unique users engage with your Power Apps. And so this is a really, really great way to go to an organization, a citizen developer, spin something up and say, hey, I think this is something that the entire business can get value out of. And instead of somebody at the highest of levels or somebody in contracts and purchasing taking a chance, making a bet on this person and saying, sure, here's however much money to make that happen, they can say, well, okay, let's put it out there for a trial period of time and let's see how people engage with it. And you can actually just pay for whoever uses it. So I think this is a really, really big step in the right direction. The second thing that I wanted to take this opportunity to highlight is one of the big challenges, and this is something that I faced in previous roles where I've built Power Apps for organizations. It's been that there's this initial hump of getting people to the Power App, because right now you can interface with Power Apps in kind of two marquee ways. You can interface with them in a web browser, or you can interface with them using the Power Apps launcher on your phone or tablet. Now, particularly, I think Power Apps really shine when you can just have them on your device. But the problem is if nobody's ever used that before, you have to go through the motions of download the Power Apps app. You have to explain.
I remember when I first looked into Power Apps and was first asking about some of these features a few years ago. The fact that you had to go in the Power Apps app to launch an app just seemed like, wait, this isn't a fully baked product. There's no way that this could be considered done.
This is just a web player.
Right. Yeah. Like, what's the point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. It's always felt like a really big disconnect because you have to explain to users, one, download the Power Apps app, which I can't believe anybody didn't stop and go, are we going to call it that? We're going to call it the Power Apps app, right? We're all in agreement.
Well, it's like a Teams team, right?
Right, exactly. It just seems to love shooting themselves in the foot with names.
You know, whatever.
But then you had to go through the whole process of walking somebody through of all the apps that you might see. Because keep in mind that if everybody's operating out of the default environment in your tenant, you're going to see every Power App that anybody has published in your organization, which, depending on the scale of your organization, could be hundreds of apps, thousands of apps. So you have to walk somebody through actually finding the app, pinning it as a favorite, opening it, accepting the permissions, all of which are just enough friction to get somebody to stop. It's just enough friction for an executive who doesn't have to do anything, chooses to do what they do, can say, I'm not going to use this, I'm out. Every one of these steps introduces the risk that that's going to be what pulls the plug on this entire effort. So that's all context setting for Microsoft has been trying to figure out the best way forward to resolve that. And this blows my mind where they've gone with it here. So they announced this idea of standalone apps. So the idea here is that Power Apps can actually function as independent apps on an Android or iOS device. One more time, that Power Apps that you design using the Power Platform, can operate as standalone apps. They don't need to use the Power Apps app. They don't need to use the Power Apps player. They can be created. They can then be distributed using a mobile device management system like Microsoft Endpoint Manager. But, and this is crazy, you can also not just publish the app to private stores like the Microsoft App Center and Apple VPP, you can also distribute them as public apps. You can submit them to the iOS App Store, to the Google Play Store as just regular apps. How cool is that? So, I mean, think about how much less friction there is, because how hard is it for, Matt, I could send you a text to an app in the App Store right now, and I could say, hey, this is a cool app, download it. Mm-hmm. Tap, tap, done, right? Everybody knows how to download an app. So if you can tap into that and build, deploy mission critical apps, we're talking about this idea of what hybrid looks like, what a return to the office might look like. So this idea that you could have like an organizational return to the office app deployed to the App Store and just send an email and be like, by the way, go download this app from the App Store. Here's the link. There it is. And it just works, is so cool. Like I think to me, that's the biggest announcement on the Power Platform universe. I just can't stop geeking out about it.
You know this space so much better than me. And I realize that we kind of go back and forth on the team stuff that I love and the Power Platform stuff that you love. And I'll say something is coming to Teams. And you'll be like, yeah, Zoom's had that for 10 years. What are you talking about? And my perspective on this is that that's foundational to any app building platform, and that this is not cool. It's like,
it should have been here.
Where were you? 3 years, not you specifically.
Sure. No,
Sean,
of course.
Where was this platform 3 years ago? What the hell? Like how do they justify that? But that's just my outsider perspective on it. Because when you talk about the friction, you're absolutely right. Like if you roll out an enterprise-wide app to fill out, let's say like a vaccine submission, right? Attestation app or something like that. The fact that you have to go through and find the app, accept, the terms of service, or like, giving the permissions, basically the connection to SharePoint for you and all, like, no, that's not no. Like obviously people do it. Organizations do it. People are making, millions of dollars consulting on this stuff. Clearly that it's, but it's just the stupid little things like that, like, you think of it like from the builder's perspective, it's like, well, yeah, that's just how it works. And it's like, right. But from the user perspective, there shouldn't be a qualifier like that. It's kind of like, right. I don't know if you've ever played with DLP policies much before with like files and stuff.
Yeah.
But the DLP policy updates only as often as the search indexer in SharePoint runs. So like
which of course everybody knows.
Right. Which you upload a file that it won't get caught by DLP for like 15 minutes. So like that thing with like social security numbers in it is basically free to be done with whatever you want to do with it, you can do it for 15 minutes. And like, okay, from the security and compliance center perspective, it's like, well, yeah, that's just how it works. And, from a user, it's like, I don't want my social security number to be free for anybody to share, externally for 15 minutes just because
what's the worst that could happen in 15 minutes?
Right. Yeah, exactly. But it's just the stupid stuff like that where it's like, well, yeah, but it's only 15 minutes and that file is going to live for 5 years. So what is 15 minutes over 5 years? It's like,
it's 15
very
minutes.
Critical period. I don't know. Just
it's 15 minutes. There's your answer.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But then again, I say in Teams like, oh yeah, I can't wait to be able to hide my own face. And you're like, yeah, Zoom's had that for, what are you talking about? These are ridiculous.
Yeah.
or the chat density in Teams is coming. It's like, yeah, well, Slack's had that for 5 years. Like, but anyway.
Chat density. That's one of those things that, again, yeah, like slipped under the radar, but it's like that should have been there from day one, because information density is
you're
critical.
Right. Yeah, I will give them credit though. I don't know if you looked at the like the UI design of what the compact look versus, I don't know if you notice that the default is called the comfort view because they can't call it like spread out or original or whatever. Like it's called the comfort, and then the new one's called compact. Layout. So the compact one is considered to be like to have like an opinion, and the other one is meant to be like, oh no, this is neutral. No, but it does look nice. They did a good job on the UI on that one. Which
and obviously, like they clearly had to think about it. Like, you know, this wasn't something that they just rushed into and like, we've got to meet Slack where they are. Like they clearly they felt the pressure.
Yeah,
and then they evaluated how best to do that within the space that they occupy.
Yeah, agreed.
So there's one more Power Platform thing that I want to bring up here, which is just as exciting as licensing, and that's governance and adoption.
Ooh, actually, I'm with you on this one. This is a good one.
So Power Platform, one of the biggest barriers to entry for the Power Platform is that organizations don't know where to start. So there are kind of two spectrums that Power Platform tends to occupy, which is organizations that don't do anything with it at all, because they're paralyzed by indecision. They don't know how to start. They don't know what best practices are. We're starting to see more names surface, but there's not the Sue Hanleys of the Power Platform out there. And so to that end, Microsoft has waited long enough. They've waited for people to try and fill that space. And I think we're starting to see them get there. But given one, how much money is going into this platform, and two, how much money they think they can get out of this, they've gone ahead and just done our homework for us. And they released what's called the Power Platform Adoption Playbook. My window is closing. Ignore that little whining sound.
Google to stop that?
I guess I could.
Oh my God, my ears. I'm bleeding.
Hey Siri, set the bedroom window to 50%.
Good work. Oh,
all right, we did it.
All right, continue.
So anyways, they created this Power Platform Adoption Playbook, and it's a combination of best practices, establishing guardrails, ways to establish and grow internal communities of citizen developers. And I think the biggest part of this is not the new creation of, this has always been out there, but the center of excellence and understanding why it matters. Because if you've tried to understand and look into the Power Platform in any meaningful way, you've probably come across the center of excellence. And the documentation is good if you understand from right where you are exactly what the Power Platform is and what it's supposed to mean. And then you can see the value of the center of excellence. Here, the playbook explains what it is, and more importantly, how to take advantage of it and how to use it to apply towards the adoption journey that you're going to be on as an organization. So I think this is awesome. I think this is just like the SharePoint Lookbook, long overdue. You can argue that the Power Platform is younger than SharePoint, but the reality is that Microsoft has been on this kick of helping us to think through these things for far longer than this has existed. So this, I'm glad it's here. You know, maybe they were waiting for the right combination of governance resources to be online, governance tool sets to be available in the platform before they wrote this. But all that to say, this is good, and I'm really excited about it. So it's available now. They also announced that if you're an organization with over, I think, 150 employees, you get access to the Microsoft Fast Track Power Platform adoption services, which is, again, awesome.
Oh, that's good to know. I wasn't aware of that.
I'll see if I can dig up. I think I saw it on Twitter. I'll dig up the link and drop it into the show notes.
Yeah, that's a good one.
But there's a lot of big stuff happening in the Power Platform, and some of it is just a maturation of the platform, but some of it is Microsoft really starting to think about, how do we make this palpable? How do we make this fun even?
Now, before we close out today, this comment is actually is apropos, and I'm going to throw you on the spot here and see if you happen to know. So I hadn't thought about the fact that if you can publish a Power App now to the app stores, I assume that when you download that app and you open it up, you'll have to log in with a legitimate O365 or M365 account or AAD enabled account.
Sure.
So how is that? Do you know if that's going to support external access to apps built on Power Apps? Like now that you can do the potentially per user and or per app payment process, like what if I want to put out a complex form on my public website? Or I want that to be built into some app. Like I'm thinking like New York, for example, has the COVID vaccine app
Sure.
where I can get a QR code that connects to my New York State Department of Health entry to like really validate that I had the vaccine versus the completely forgeable piece of paper that they gave us. That form, like, could that be both in the app and on a public website? Like, are they opening up the permissions or the licensing of it now? Because before, as far as I was aware, could be wrong here, so maybe my assumptions here are completely, that anything done in the Power Platform was internal. Now, granted, Power Automate can send an email externally, but like think about more of the
sure,
the enterprise
using
solutions.
it, actually like interacting with data, you know, things like that. So 2 points. One, the Microsoft has been exploring this concept of the Power Platform as a external facing entity, and they've been doing that through Power Apps portals. So that's been a space where they've been exploring that. You know, companies like American Airlines and a few others have already been taking advantage of. For anybody that's familiar with Salesforce, it's essentially akin to their Salesforce Lightning platform or communities platform. So you can essentially create a authenticated gateway. Users can create accounts, things like that. So that exists already.
Oh, okay.
But Power Apps portals and Power Apps are still two functionally different things. To that end, does this open the door to kind of a realignment of what that means to be, you know, a Power Apps portal versus a Power App that's external facing? Maybe. And perhaps this pay-as-you-go licensing may be a step in that direction, because one of the big challenges has been having to license specific users. So as of today, no, you can't. Power Apps portals, there's not really like a cross-organizational concept there, but it does potentially open the door to that. They didn't say anything about it at Ignite, but you got to have something to announce, you know, March, right?
That's true. Yeah. Hey, or legitimately though, like, you know, when they do the BizApp Summit, which actually I think they just recently did that, if I'm not mistaken. It didn't get nearly as much press as the other conferences, but Inspire, Build, if nothing else, is the developer conference, which I realize that Power Platform is citizen developer, but I still think that they cover some stuff from Power Platform, because why not?
Sure.
You know?
And the line is blurring more and more every day. You've already seen them start to say, you know, like citizen developer, no code, pro code. Yeah. So they're starting to talk about these things in the same breath.
Yeah. Cool. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's reasonably good overview of some of the things that really stood out to us. If you didn't already see our recap of what was announced at Microsoft Ignite, just go back into the YouTube feed and you'll find the video that was posted over the weekend. So we kind of cut through all the things that we thought stood out big picture wise. I will note it is no longer the year of Yammer, because Yammer was not even referenced once in the book of news. But I will say that there was a little defense of that I saw on Twitter, which is basically, oh, well, all the Yammer updates are rolled into Viva Connections, which just points out the fact that brand just doesn't make any freaking sense at all, because I just want to know what came to Yammer and I have to go look for Viva. Anyway. So yeah, I think that's probably good for today. So thanks, Sean. Good to see you again, and so soon after we dove through.
I know I'm spoiled. I don't know if you've noticed, but I was cyberbullied into shaving my mustache.
If anybody wants to see some real, I mean, like, you're gonna be just, I mean, amazed. It was a thing of beauty. Don't even watch our video for the content. Watch it for Sean's beautiful mustache
play.
You just got to do it.
To be clear, the offer is still out there. That if the video we put out the other day, the initial Ignite news recap, if that hits 1,000 likes, I'll grow it back and I'll keep that mustache for a month.
People,
please don't do that.
Ask
But
your
if you
mom,
do-
ask your Facebook groups to go like that video, because I want this mustache back and I want it so bad. It was just a thing of beauty. But
We're 24 hours into it and we've already got 100 likes, so the trend is not looking great.
Well, I mean, hey, things can the YouTube algorithm is very unpredictable.
It's an enigma.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. So, all right. Well, thanks so much, Sean. As always, just a pleasure chatting with you. And to everybody else watching, thanks so much for watching. As you always, leave a comment below to continue the discussion. And next week, we'll be coming back to you on Monday. So if you want to watch live, by all means, feel free. A like and subscribe is also appreciated. John, thank you so much for joining me this week, and cannot wait to hang out with everybody again next week.
That was the new.
I mean, it's not wrong. That was the news.
It was. That totally was the news. Anyway, good.